turbocharged, petrol, all-wheel drive, manual vehicle, your options are limited. When it debuted a few years ago, it was just a little bit underwhelming in my opinion. Not that powerful, a bit heavier, a bit bigger than previous generation models. Doesn't sound all that good either compared with previous generation models. Whereas now, yeah, it's actually more and more appealing as time goes on. I'm even coming around to the design a little bit. I like the angled headlights, pretty aggressive. The plastic wheel arch extensions are a bit SUV-like, but it's got these little extraction vents here. So basically when the wheel compresses, with the suspension compresses, the air has to go somewhere, so it's vented out of these little fins here. Subaru says it doesn't need them at the back, but instead we've got this little trim piece in Australia, whereas in some markets that's a mandatory reflector. From the back it looks pretty aggressive as well. It's got a kind of diffuser. It's not really, it's a bit of a fake diffuser. These fins that don't actually do anything, and a trim piece along the bottom. You might notice these quad outlet exhausts. This has got the optional STI rear muffler pack on both sides, and it does give off a more sporty note than the standard setup. It doesn't sound too bad actually. It's got this sort of bassy note to it, but it doesn't have that trademark Subaru WRX throb anymore. It's just kind of like a typical bassy sports exhaust almost. There's a little bit of drone inside the cabin. If you're cruising along the highway and you're only going about 90 and you're in 6th gear revving at about 2000 RPM, there's a bit of a bassy drone to it. But if you're going along the highway at about 110, it requires almost 3000 RPM to maintain that speed. And that kind of rev just sort of goes past that bassy low-end drone. So it's not too bad to cruise on the highway. Fuel consumption is obviously not the best at that engine speed. One thing that really has warmed on me is this interior, because it's pretty big now. You can actually fit 5 adults in there with reasonable comfort, or at least 4 with reasonable comfort. The steering wheel is a little bit big for my liking, but these WRX seats are really nice. Big side bolsters, kind of like a suede trim in the middle sections. And they're power adjustable on this RS variant. And then in the back, yeah, decent amount of space for this class. You've got cup holders, flip down armrest. There's no climate vents, but you do have seat heating, which is a bit strange. 2 types of USB port to charge your phone, bottle holders in the doors, and a pocket just on the passenger seat. To open the boot, you've got to push this button, which is a little bit annoying. There's no button at the back here. You can push the remote button as well. And you've got a decent sized boot. Under the floor, you've got a space saver spare wheel, although it is quite a large one. And it almost has, you know, relatively low profile tyre for a temporary use only spare wheel. Then under the bonnet, 2.4 litre flat 4 turbocharged, a functioning bonnet scoop, so that actually does feed air to the intercooler at the top here. And then the intake down the front here. You could probably fit a nice cold air intake to just streamline that whole process. The power output isn't that impressive for today's standards, but it's got a lot of mechanical torque. So the gearing is very short ratio. You can pull out of hairpin corners and so on and really rip around the corner because of that short gearing. The engine only produces 350 Newton meters itself, which is not that good for a 2.4 litre. Most 2 litre turbo petrol 4-cylinder engines these days produce around 400 Newton meters. So 350 Newton meters in this from a 2.4, yeah, it's not that impressive. I think Subaru could have done better there. Maybe they figured out that more engine torque would just be too much with the mechanical torque as well. But I think it could have done with longer gearing, particularly the higher gears. If I had it my way, I would have the engine producing around 400 Newton meters and then have slightly longer gearing. Especially first gear is extremely short. You probably extend that a little bit, and then 5th and 6th definitely have a little bit longer, or even just change the final drive ratio for the whole lot. So it just, yeah, changes the whole thing completely. Because if the engine had more torque, then it would pull through longer gearing with no problem. Doesn't have to worry about wheel spin because it's all-wheel drive. So I don't know why they've done that. It would also be better on fuel because you're not revving the engine so much. But anyway, if you are planning to track this thing or enter hill climbs and so on, obviously short gearing is what you want. There's no sport mode on the manual version, but you do have a track mode. So you just hit the stability control button once and you get a track mode. Of Good pedal placement, so you can easily heel and toe during downshifts. There's a little bit of turbo lag, or it feels like it. Like you put your foot down and it's got the 2.4 litre engine's torque, but then you get this dump of boost soon after. The gear shift is pretty good. It's got a little bit of notchiness as usual with Subarus, but it's not actually that bad. You can slam home third from second pretty easily. Yeah, and the chassis remains nice and flat. There's no body roll. It's just the suspension is a little bit soft if you were really going to attack a track or something like that. Great for a road like this though, because you can absorb the bumps, doesn't disturb the balance of the car. Yeah, red line comes up really quickly because of that short gearing. It only revs to 6,000 RPM. First gear is over in no time at all. As you'll see in the performance test coming up, you've got to be really quick shifting into second gear. And in fact, I tried a few different launch methods as well as gear shift RPM to see which is quicker. So you'll see coming up, you'll be surprised what method is actually quickest. Around tight corners, flooring it, the all-wheel drive system sorts out the grip and rips you around the corner. It's definitely exciting in the way that it does have a lot of grip. I think this sports exhaust system does sort of enhance the experience a bit as well, because there's a bit of theatre now, whereas before it was this whooshing sort of rough whooshing sound, whereas now you've actually got a little bit of bass. Decent brakes, as you'll see in the performance test, they pull up all right, and they offer decent repetitive performance as well. Like I've come down, back and forth up and down this road a few times just to test the thing, and it's behaving nicely. Third gear is the best actually, because of that short gearing. You can apply pretty much full throttle from 3,000 RPM and it just builds speed, builds engine speed as well, nice and progressively. And then when you're done having a thrash, it becomes a decent cruiser, whereas the previous generation models, they might have been a bit too hardcore for absolute cruising, maybe, whereas this is definitely well suited to cruising. You could take this down to the snow or something like that and still be in reasonable comfort, in quite good comfort actually. The exhaust noise reminds me of the sort of later versions of the STI, the proper STI, because they were always a little bit rougher. There's a bit more bass to the standard exhaust system. That's kind of what this sounds like, sort of, with this new technology, this new engine technology with direct injection and so on. It's just a little bit of sort of roughness. There's not a distinct burble from left and right like there was before. There's a little bit of a pop and bang on the overrun just then. You can't quite hear it. It's probably better from the actual tailpipe. You don't really hear it from inside the cabin. Old school element, apart from the manual transmission, is the fact that it's got mechanical dials, which is nice, and you do have this adjustable screen in the middle there. You've got live tire pressure monitoring, lap timer, and fuel consumption. We're averaging 13.2 at the moment, but I have been thrashing it around quite a bit. And then you've got your real-time turbo boost gauge. Looks like it's maxed out there at about 100 kPa. Just while we're cruising along the highway, you can see we need about 3,000 RPM to maintain 120-ish. If you want to slow down to 110, that brings the revs down a little bit. Everyone everyone's going a bit faster than that. But anyway, if you go 110, you need about 2,600 RPM. As you can probably hear, the exhaust system is not too droney. It is just the mufflers at the back after all, so there's nothing in the middle here that would cause droney sort of noises. But as you drop the engine revs down, it does start to become a bit more apparent that you do have that optional exhaust. All right, let's head out now to the private road and do some performance testing to see what it goes like. As I said, I've done a few different runs to show you an example of how to best launch this, but also what engine revs to change the gear for the quickest time. To start with, I'll do a pretty aggressive launch, but not super aggressive. As in, this is how I'd launch it if it was my car. Done 6.50 exactly. Now I'll try a very mild launch, not revving it up too much. That was 6.80. Now I'll try maximum attack mode. This is how you get these things off the line the quickest as possible, although I wouldn't recommend driving like this off at the lights every single time, because the clutch pack will probably hand in its notice and resign pretty quick. So maximum revs. It's done 6.3, 6.29. I reckon there's a little bit more in that. I'll do it again. I reckon short shifting first to second is the best way to go, because this drivetrain actually produces a lot of torque. So the first gear is over in a matter of seconds, and it's easy to hit the red line going from first to second, as I pretty much am during those launches. So this time I'll try and short shift kind of at about 5,500 just from first to second, and then the remaining gears I'll wind it all the way out to 6,000. Still maximum attack for the launch, so revving it right up to pretty much red line, but then I'll short shift at about 5,500. It's done 6.32, so slightly slower. It's pretty much the same time, really. 6.32. I'll give it one more go. This time I will maybe even short shift at 5,000, even lower again, just from first to second, but then I'll wind the rest of the gears out. Actually a little bit quicker again, even though I short shift all of the gears, not just first to second. I said I'll just do first to second. That was 6.18. But yeah, there's a lot of mechanical torque there, so it's best to shift gears early, as we just saw. So that's the quickest run so far. But definitely rev it right up off the line to get the best initial launch. I'm going to try one more run, same thing, but I'm going to short shift 5,000 RPM every gear just to see. I know it'll be a little bit slower, but just want to double check. I'll just run it to 100 as well. Felt slower, but it's done at the same time, 6.2 seconds. 6.15, so that's actually the quickest so far. And that was short shifting at 5,000 RPM. So it definitely does not like, or yeah, it's not quicker by revving it all the way out. It's just proven then revving it all the way out to 6,000 throughout the gear changes is not actually quicker in this new WRX. It's better off just shifting at 5,000 RPM. It doesn't feel right, and the gears are very short, so you've really got to work your arm to get each gear across, but that's actually the quickest way to do it, according to these tests I'm doing right now anyway. There we go, that's the best I could do today, 6.15 seconds. I have achieved 5.97, I think, in the 2022 model. Same piece of tarmac, same Vbox and everything, but that STI sports exhaust system doesn't seem to provide a big difference in performance, or any difference in performance. Not that Subaru ever claimed that it did, it's just a set of mufflers after all. But it does sound a bit better in my opinion, it's got a bit more beef to it.